Hi everyone, in the previous video I've made a tutorial in Houdini how to make mesh for this effect, and in this video I would like to show you how to create various textures, or more like a generator for those kind of slashes. So we're gonna end up having a very simple generator in Substance Designer. In the first video, because I probably have to split this into two parts. So in the first one, we're gonna create like a base texture and very simple generator. And in the second part, we're gonna iterate and create a lot more textures from this Substance file. Okay, so let's dive into Substance now and let's create this generator. So I'm gonna start with simple shape. I'm gonna pick the soft circle. I'm gonna add transform so I can move it around, and I'm gonna plug this into warp. Okay, and I'm gonna grab this texture, basically run it through blur and plug this into our warp. So as you can see in our warp, I'm actually gonna ramp up the intensity. So you can kind of see what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to get those lines, and I'm making this texture to be visible on a plane, like a square, because in the previous video in Houdini I made a mesh, and that's how my UVs are laid out on that mesh. Okay, so basically I'm just gonna get that texture, put it on that slash mesh that we've made in Houdini, and it's gonna stretch that texture and make the desired look. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep it as it is, although I'm probably gonna reduce the intensity of the blur and maybe those as well, because I think there's like too many of those lines. And maybe on the X I'm just gonna get it to 2 so I can get a bit more directional with those lines. And I made this transform, so now I can basically click on it and move this, for example, here. I want to disable the tiling as well. As you can see, we're getting that warp happening roughly around that circle. So what I'm going to do, because this is the highlight and the most brightest point on that sphere, well, circle, I'm just going to put it in that corner and then manually stretch it. Okay, so those are our lines, and imagine this is the top of that texture will be tip of our sword, axe, or any melee weapon, and then it's just gonna taper down this way, and it's just gonna create this nice trail behind it. Okay, because it's just gonna stretch on the horizontal axis. Right, so I'm just gonna keep it as is. I'm gonna add histogram scan as well, so I can fully control how I want this to appear and how much contrast I actually want. Maybe I want a bit more stylized though, so I can just ramp up the contrast. But I'm just gonna keep it kind of default for now, because I'm just trying to create base for this generator. And the next, I'm gonna create a transform. Again, I'm not gonna do anything to it, just in case if I have to move this around later on. So now I want to get rid of those lines, for example, because if you imagine those are our UVs, I don't want any texture to be at the bottom. Okay, because that will be the end of our trial. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna tab and get the linear gradient. I'm gonna get the histogram scan. And now I'm just gonna blend those together using multiply. So I want those lines only be visible when where our histogram scan is. Okay. So now if I ramp up the contrast, we're getting a lot more data here, and with the position, I can decide how much of this texture I want to be visible at the bottom. I'm gonna apply some directional blur to it to get some sort of movement in the texture, kind of like a motion blur. So if you see that it actually stretches a little bit too much, you can click on this transform node and just move this around just a tiny bit, so you get like a nice gradient from the start to the end. The next thing is I actually want to taper it. So like this is the start and tip of our sword. So I want this to be hotspot, and then I want this to kind of tapered like this. Okay, because that's gonna give us this nice trail look in our sword slash. Okay, so I'm gonna basically create another blend. I'm gonna bring a linear gradient, histogram scan, I'm gonna use transform. For the transform, I want to manually rotate it like this. Again, let's try to disable tiling mode. Okay, and now we can actually get this mask here. Okay, so I'm just gonna put it around here, just stretch this and create this hotspot around this area. And we're getting this slightly tapered look here. You can still go back and just tweak your rotation if you want. Go back to histogram scan, and now you should be able to fully control how much you actually want of that texture to appear. Quite like this. So we're taking a little bit from here and we're getting this nice tapered look. If we want a bit more data here, we can always go back to the transform node and just move this back. And as you can see, we're getting like a nice gradients. We're getting like a really nice gradients here from start to the end, and the tapered look here as well. Right, so now I want to apply even more hotspot to this area, because again, it's a tip of our melee weapon. So I'm gonna blend it again, and I'm gonna create a linear gradient. Actually, I'm just gonna copy and paste our previous setup. That one, plug it back in, set it to add this time. And actually I want to manually rotate it. And now I can go back to histogram scan, change the position to add just a little bit of that hotspot. And I think that's working correctly. If you want this to be a bit more circular, you can always add shape instead of this gradient. Add the transform, plug this here, change the shape to maybe, let's try the soft circle, and move the circle to this area. So it depends what kind of look you are going for. Okay, bear in mind you can also squash this circle and create maybe better highlight here. If this is too like a straight edge for you, or even this, for example, what you can always do, you can just run it through warp with some purlin noise as well. Here, I'm going to reduce the scale of the purlin noise. As you can see here, it's a little bit distorted now, so hopefully it looks a bit better. I'm gonna plug our circle, plug this back in, and it's got this a little bit irregular shape, so you can just go here and maybe tweak the values of this. Also, if you want this to be a bit more blurry, just apply blur to it. So it's gonna blend a little bit nicer with this image that you have in the background. Okay, so I'm gonna keep those here just in case if I want to actually use it later down the line. Right, the next thing, I actually want to add highlight here. So if, again, sword or melee weapon is right here, I want this to be very, very bright, and then it's gonna taper off in terms of intensity on that texture. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna bring another linear gradient. Histogram scan. some contrast as well. So I want to create this, just a line here, and I want to blend it again with this using add. So as you can see, we're kind of getting this nice, very bright highlight around this area where our sword is actually swinging, and it kind of tapers here, and it just reduces intensity in that texture as well. Okay, so just maybe you want to just a slight, just a line there, and I think that works pretty good. And the last thing, I just want to get rid of the sides, so I'm going to do another linear gradient. I'm going to rotate it, get the histogram scan, and now if I just change the position or even the contrast, I'm just going to get rid of the sides. So I'm going to set the blend actually to multiply, not subtract. Now I'm going to go back to this, just increase it, because I just want to get rid of texture from here, so I can actually pan or move this texture around. The next thing is, as you can see, this kind of line is very straight. So what you could do, you can actually go back to this line and you can try to taper it here. Just cut it out using this technique. So let's just copy and paste this generator, this one. And I'm gonna blend this and use multiply. So we're only getting this line here, but now we can just select this transform node and just rotate it slightly. Okay. And now if you want this line to be a bit more visible, you can always just play with this value. I would keep definitely this highlight because it's nice to have like a glow around this swing, or any melee weapon source. And then I'll just taper out and get rid of the intensity in a texture the further it goes from the source. I want to keep this highlight because it just looks like a really clean cut in the effect. Okay. Right, so that's our generator. And now what I'm gonna do, actually, I'm just gonna grab some random textures like this one, run it through maybe blur and transform as well, just to show you, like, we've got this, it's fine, but now let's just use this as a generator and generate a little bit different look for our swing textures or slash textures. Okay. So as you can see here, we're getting a little bit more stylized look and very kind of blurry as well. So you can just try with different textures. You can even stretch those like this, move those around using the transform nodes, and as you can see, you could get like a really cool stylized look on those slashes. So I'm just gonna bring it a little bit together. What I'm gonna try, I'm just gonna grab one of the grunge textures. This one, I'm gonna use again this blur and transform as well. So just copy paste, plug this back in. I'm gonna go to the last node, grab this transformation tool, and just move it like this. You can also just grab this warp actually and play a little bit with the warp. You can just skip the warp completely maybe and plug it into the blend. So you could see that we're actually getting even different look from this. Let's maybe put the directional blur here. So if you want to skip the directional blur and get a bit more control over how you want your texture to appear, you could do this and get slightly different looks for your slashes. Alright, so I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna create second part for this. So please keep this generator because we will be just adding stuff to it and exploring different textures. And in the second video, I'm actually gonna grab a mesh in Unreal Engine and I'm gonna show you how it's gonna look once we have those textures. And we're gonna apply those into the our slash in Unreal Engine. Alright, thank you so much for watching.